Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. I create with paper and stories in artful ways. Today my scrapbook layout will be featuring different shapes as well as using colors to set the mood and tone for the story. This is a project over at the Scrap Happy membership group, and as part of the creative team, we are all providing sample layouts for our Load Mini project, and I'll share more info on that as we go. For now, we are working with a story prompt of learning something new and a technique prompt to use a favorite technique. So we just adopted 2 new kittens to add to our house with our one old man cat, and I snapped this photo of their very first interaction, so I'm going to tell the story from their perspective of learning to get along. And if you don't know about Scrap Happy or the Load project, I will leave you links down below for everything so you can check that out and see if this is a project that you might enjoy. All right, my favorite technique is to use watercolor. If you've been here for a while, you probably know that. But if you're new here, welcome. And I am not an artist, but I am artful and I love to watercolor. So I have been working this month with these mica-infused watercolor paints. These are no longer on the market, but you can find various mica watercolor paints out there if you're interested in that. You don't have to use mica for this technique in particular. I'm just enjoying working with these right now. I am really focusing on color at this point. I want to use color to really set the mood for this story. So I am pulling out reds and oranges as well as blues and purples. And these colors have emotional value to them in our culture. Now, color can mean different things in different culture, but in general, in the American culture and most Western cultures, reds and oranges are high energy and even evoke feelings of danger. So I am using the reds and oranges for that mood. Here's the watercolor paper I use. This is available at scrapbook.com as well as on Amazon, and I will leave a link down below. I appreciate you using my affiliate links. They don't cost you anything extra, but I get a very small kickback from the company for sending business their way, and that helps me stay in product so I can keep bringing these projects to you. So you saw me bring out that ruler there, and what I am going to do is slice this photo. Have you ever cut up your photos into odd ways? Yes, way back in the day, we used to cut our photos into circles and various other shapes, but here I am really being purposeful about this shape. And that's because this angle is another shape that evokes emotion. I just trimmed off the excess of that photo because that helps bring the focus back into those kittens. So with the angle of the shape, that's evoking kind of a wary mood because high angular shapes are not soft and calming. They're the opposite. As I'm looking for papers to mat these shapes, I ditched that first idea and I turned to this kit, which is a photoplay cat themed kit. And I don't buy a lot of themed things, but because cats are a big part of my world, and especially since I knew we were going to be getting kittens, I did buy this kit. Now, most of that kit is very cutesy, which is not this story at all. And that's why I'm going with just using these mild pattern papers as my backgrounds. And luckily, it so happened to have oranges and blues in that kit. And, you know, matting photos with different shapes can be challenging. So my photo mats didn't work out perfectly, but I'm going to go with it. I was trying to get those sharp angles, but there we go. So anyway, I got lucky that I've got the colors in that kit that I want to do. And I am going to mask off a portion of my watercolor paper here so that I can get different zones that are gonna follow the angle that I created for those photos. And the first step to this process is to completely wet my paper. My paint is already wet and activated, so now I am dropping wet paint down on wet paper. And as you might imagine, this technique is called wet on wet. What happens with this technique is when you drop that wet paint, The water helps move that pigment around and you get these organic blooms and spreads of paint. Now, you can see up there I had a little too much water, and that's partially because as you get the paper wet, it can curl a little bit and the water is tending to pool at the bottom edge of that curl. It's okay. Just tap it with a paper towel, or here I have a rag, and soak up that extra water, and that will kind of stop the movement of that water and paint so that you can get what you're looking for. And what I am looking for is to get these question mark shapes in the background, and I want them to blur out. I am going to add a few smaller ones that are more sharp and clear, because if they get too blurry, then you totally lose the shape. Like the one there on the right is a little too blurry. So having these double tones of shapes there can help set that story. So as you can see, I'm just adding extra shapes here and there, and they will blur out a little bit. But because my paper has started to dry a little bit, they will keep most of their shape. Speaking of drying, I did go ahead and let this dry completely, and there I was trying to show you a little bit of the mica. It shows up better in person than it does on the camera, but anyway, I tried to capture a little bit of that. All right, now I'm ready to work on my bottom zone. So I am also purposefully adding that split between the photo to give that feeling of disconnect between the two halves, or the two cats, as you can see in the picture. Well, three cats. I've got two new kittens and my one old man cat. So that gap there is going to lend to that idea of a disconnect, and I'm going to use that gap to further the design of the layout. In the meantime, I did glue that top photo down, and I covered up with some extra paper so that it doesn't end up getting wet. Now you could just save that photo off to the side and do that at the very end, which probably would have been a better idea, but you just go as you do and things happen along the way. All right, I am getting that wet on wet background flow with this kind of orangey color, and I love how that orange in particular is splitting out with some pinks in there. So if you don't know how your different paints will react, I suggest doing swatches so that you can see what other undertones might be in your colors, because any one color of paint is going to have various pigments in it to create that color. And as they split out with a technique like this, you're going to see those different pigments coming out. All right, I have gone ahead and drawn some kind of lightning bolt zigzag shapes because, again, those sharp angles create that kind of raw energy that I'm trying to evoke down here with this bottom photo, because my kittens were the ones hissing and growling at my old man cat, which I did not expect to be the case. So it kind of surprised me that they were the ones freaking out. I thought they'd want to romp and play and that he would be angry and upset, but this is how my story is going, so I am capturing this story here. All right, my paper is completely dry. It will be slightly warped. I tend to curl it the opposite direction of any bends that it has, and that helps flatten it out. Plus, once you get it into an album and it's smushed up against other pages, it will flatten out some. And if that still bugs you, you can try other techniques like putting it under some very heavy books or something for a couple of days to help flatten it out. For me, I don't mind because I like the process. And yes, I do like saving the stories, but the process is just as important to me as getting the stories down. So I let go of some of that perfectionism with the bent paper. All right, I want to contain this funk a little bit, as Vicky Button is known to say, that with these border lines, and that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to help unify the top and the bottom a little bit with similar elements. It's going to kind of pull everything in. It's going to help narrow the focus back down. And for me, it creates kind of a visual stop between the imagery on the page and the edge of the page where your eye could just kind of keep going and wander away. So with that done, I'm going to move on to using that central zone for a title, and I'm going to use techniques with this title to kind of help tie the two sides of the layout together. So I'm using the same pattern paper that I matted my photos with to help spell out the words of my title. I'm going to alternate them or reverse them so that the orange is at the top and the blue is at the bottom to represent kind of that mingling going on with these pets. And if you haven't seen me do this before, I've got these really fussy letters that I'm using. This is a Concord and Ninth die set that has an outer edge to the alphabets, and I really like this alphabet set, but it is a little time consuming to use. So I will use a scratch piece of paper with glue and tap my letters into the glue and then tap the excess off, and that will give me just enough glue to work with these teeny tiny pieces. All right, I did pull out the sticker set from that photo play set, and I really wanted 2 cat paws so that I could have them reach across the aisle. But I only had 1 cat paw on there, so I am going to make do with that, and I'm going to keep the embellishing for the rest of the layout really super simple, just because the focus of this layout really has to do with that watercolor mood that I'm setting. I did cut apart this heart embellishment, and I'm kind of filling in the black part of that with white so that I can use it later, but I wanted the little banner pieces off the edge of it that have some words on them that will work with this layout. So I will just get all of that in place, and then we'll come back in a moment. All right, I did cut one of the tabs and spread it across the layout to tie it together, and that's the space where I can write hiss 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 on this tab, since the pre-made embellishments don't cover that kind of story, and these are stories that really happen in our lives. So I had to go my own way, make my own background pattern paper, and make do with embellishments that I could make work for my story. All right, I've got my journaling around the outside edge, and I added 1 little heart to that kitten paw to hope for unity in the future. And speaking of the future, I will be making a companion page with this, with all of these notes that I'm saving about how their interactions are going over time. And at some point in the future, they will be getting along, and I will have that story to tell later. All right, thank you so much for being here, for watching. I hope you got something useful out of this. I will be back in the future with more videos for you. And until then, I hope you have an artful day.